Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report coming to you from sunny Los Angeles, and it is officially countdown to the Armageddon that is JP Morgan and its share price heading toward the proverbial big fat goose egg on top of a Bermuda Triangle of fraud, incompetence, and overall scumbaggery by its leader, Jamie Dimon. Stacy Herbert, tell me more.
Max, you are, of course, speaking of that which Jamie Dimon said pundits such as you and I would have a field day with, which is why we're coming to you from a field, including with sound effects like the birds.
That's not a sound effect, Stacy Herbert. That would be an actual bird.
Well, of course, we're talking about it doesn't get any better than this. Suicide banker Jamie Dimon self-inflicts a whopper. JP Morgan Chase announced a surprise $2 billion trading loss on credit derivatives trading, which chief executive Jamie Dimon blamed on, quote, errors, sloppiness, and bad judgment, and warned could get worse.
You know, it's definitely going to get worse, Stacy, because the blood is in the water. People are understanding that this is the Lehman of our day, of this year, the Enron of this year. They've got tens of trillions of dollars worth of liabilities on their balance sheet. They try to pass it off on the Fed's balance sheet, but then the Fed is saying, you know, we have only so much toxic debt that we can absorb from these bogoombas down there at JP Morgan, and the hedge funds are going to start selling this thing naked short, killing it, obliterating it. Can't wait to see the stock at zero. Any hedge fund out there making easy money, sell short this puppy to zero.
Max, a few things there. First of all, regarding Jamie Dimon's comment, he said it was errors, sloppiness, and bad judgment, which it already seems like he's setting up the Corzine defense here. It's chaos in the back office. So we're just using little sloppiness, errors, little things like that. It's going to be blamed on the back office, perhaps, once the whole thing comes down. Now, he's also admitted to just $2 billion in losses. Jamie Dimon himself says these positions are still open, but he refused to disclose any details about the trades that the bank had put on, but said that it would now focus on, quote, maximizing the economic value of these positions. We've got staying power and we're willing to use it.
Well, they can't reveal details because he doesn't really know the details. As a corporate governor, he's a failure. As a chairman, he's a failure. As a CEO, he's a failure. As a banker, he's a failure. He has absolutely no idea what anybody is doing in his organization. And that's another reason why he should sell the stock short pretty aggressively. And, you know, I'm looking forward to the day when he's got to go in front of Congress and explain why, because he's an egomaniac pig, he decided to throw the entire U.S. economy under the bus.
Well, another reason why he may be failing to disclose what these trades are, this is why JP Morgan isn't giving you any details about the trade that caused this $2 billion loss. FT Alphaville put it this way, Business Insider says, certainly the losses may grow, particularly if rival traders now reckon they can turn the screws. The positions that put JP Morgan in peril have yet to be closed. The bank's traders are rushing to close those positions, but until they do, the bank is vulnerable. So Business Insider says, Max, think about it. It's like kicking a man when he's down.
Yeah, it's also like an Agatha Christie novel where, you know, Lehman Brothers got blown up. Bear Stearns got blown up. You know, because JP Morgan, remember, they sold Bear Stearns stock short in the marketplace and killed Bear Stearns stock with a premeditated financial terrorist attack. Jamie Dimon is a terrorist. Let's keep that straight. Now, he looks like might not be the guy to survive the attacks from other independents and rogues out there that would do to him what he did to Bear Stearns. Like, he's got a cushy relationship with the Fed. He's practically got a lip lock on Ben Bernanke's tit, sucking that free Fed milk, and he's becoming a big fat Fed. And we should keep that in mind. But at some point, the Fed is going to stop lactating free milk into Jamie's maw. And he's going to have to grow up and work for a living. You're going to have to get a job, you freaking loser.
Another important point about this insider saying it's like kicking a man when he's down is here's JP Morgan, a bank that exists. That's their business model, is kicking people who are down, whether it's Bear Stearns or whether it's Jefferson County, Alabama, where they kicked the county to the ground and then continued kicking them and now sell them food stamps because they're all broke and desperate thanks to Jamie Dimon's fraudulent, interest rate swaps sold to the town.
Yeah, and who provides the capital for ththose food stamps? Again, Ben Bernanke's lactating bosom gives them all the money they need to issue food stamps to the people that they just disenfranchised with their attacks on the municipalities, whether it's in the U.S. or abroad. People in Greece blowing their brains out because Jamie Dimon's an arrogant, selfish pig.
Yes, okay. And now the other important thing to note about this is that we've seen Blythe Masters saying they take no positional trades. They're just hedging out of London. They're hedging client positions. So she in particular referred to their massive silver shorts. She said, we're just hedging positions for our long silver clients. And here we have a situation where if it were a hedge, as Carl Denninger puts it, by definition, if something is a hedge, then it's balanced by a gain somewhere else. So this was not hedging. It was speculation, and there's only one thing worse than speculating. That's unintentionally speculating.
Well, they were intentionally taking speculation, which is the exact opposite of what Blythe just said, what Jamie's been talking about. The regulators don't care because they're in the FSA in London. Hello, you're in the pocket of Morgan. Do you care? No, you're completely worthless. Mary Schapiro at the SEC, I'm sure she had a conference call with Jamie before this news to work out how they would handle it and massage it to make sure that the markets weren't disturbed, even though the rapist that just totally slammed the market with an unmitigated gall of a financial terrorist. Keep it up.
Okay. Well, Carl Denninger continues on this story as well. More insider trading, JPM, that's the stock symbol for JP Morgan. Their shares, as we know, collapsed 6% in the aftermarket, 8% and 10% down. As the chart shows from Carl Denninger, this is the options trading on JP Morgan on that Thursday when Jamie Dimon came out after the markets closed to warn people that they had this $2 billion loss that could grow. He says, quote, the highlighted field shows $13,841 puts traded today and expire tomorrow for at the close about 43 cents. They're worth a fair bit more than that right now, like $3. Why would you buy a crap load of $41 puts with a stock trading just under $41 for expiration tomorrow that would be literally worthless in 24 hours unless you knew something in advance? So, Max, you were an options trader. What does this tell you?
Insider trading. Clear and simple. And, of course, the regulators know about it. It's profitable to trade on inside information in Washington. And the defense that Lloyd Blankfein or Dimon uses when they get called up occasionally for a dog and pony show in front of Congress. We're adding liquidity. We're making a market. No, I mean, if I go into a liquor store and I shoot 3 people dead and steal 20 bucks from the cash register, I'm not making a market in thievery. Okay? I'm committing a crime. Schapiro, you worthless, rotten scoundrel.
Well, let's talk about what Mary Schapiro said. She's in my next headline, Max. SEC Schapiro obviously focused on JP Morgan trade. Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Mary Schapiro said on Friday that regulators were obviously very focused on the situation at JP Morgan Chase & Company, JPM, after the bank's surprise announcement that it will take a, quote, significant trading loss. Schapiro said to reporters, quote, all the regulators are very focused on this. She declined, however, to comment on whether the trade gives an impetus to regulators to adopt the Volcker rule, which seeks to limit speculative trading. She also declined to comment on whether the Financial Stability Oversight Council, a group of bank, securities, and housing regulators, plan to meet to discuss the trade.
Mary Schapiro's definition of focused means that before biting into a cucumber sandwich at the commissary somewhere in Washington, D.C., she mentioned it to somebody online waiting to buy their macaroni and cheese to the effect of, did you hear about J.P. Morgan? Oh, yeah, terrible. Pass me the ketchup. That's all the time they spent on. That's my point, is that they're not focused on this. They're not adjudicating. They're not regulating. They are part of the problem. They are deeply ingrained in the fabric of fraud, and they take money for this. It'll be revealed that she is also part of this. It's disgusting.
Well, again, you know, here they always can never find evidence of a crime. MF Global collapsed, dead. The company, a 240-year-old company, dead. And nobody knows if there's a crime. Here, again, we don't know if people have broken the Volcker rule.
Well, we know that, for a fact, something has gone wrong. We know that these banks operate outside of the minimum capital requirements laws that are on the books, and from there they commit various other manner of fraud. And they claim that they're adding liquidity into the system is the excuse for committing fraud, and nobody is telling them that they're wrong, even though, as a result, people are dying. But dead people in the street is considered collateral damage. If you're a Wall Street banker, just step over them, Jamie. Just step over the dead people, Mary Schapiro. Don't worry about them. They'll smell and rot, and they'll, you get the putridness of the dying corpse in your face that you created. Don't worry about it. Don't smell it. Put a perfume on. Go ahead. It's okay. You're not going to burn in hell. No. Trust me. You're going to the good place.
Well, Max, also, the other thing about this is, remember, Jamie Dimon stood up at Ben Bernanke's press conference a few months ago, like berating him for even thinking of instituting any regulations on this very market in which we've seen these losses, that we don't know the end of the losses yet. But again, here's Mary Schapiro saying, oh, we're concerned about it, we're going to focus on it. And it reminded me of the heart of where this, this event took place, and that is London. And here I want to turn to whether or not a headline that might give you some indication of what Mary Schapiro might find when focusing on J.P. Morgan. Leveson Inquiry. Jeremy Hunt asked News Corp for advice on phone hacking, new emails show. So the Culture Secretary for the United Kingdom, Jeremy Hunt, faces fresh questions over his relationship with News Corporation after an email from its chief lobbyist claimed the Culture Secretary had asked him for, quote, private advice on the phone hacking investigation to guide his and Number 10's positioning. The same email shows that News Corp was given an, quote, extremely helpful tip-off by Mr. Hunt's office that he would refer to phone hacking in a statement to Parliament.
Right, so here's a twofer for you. Sell short J.P. Morgan stock, and while you're at it, sell short News Corp stock, because Murdoch, that imbecile, is going down. Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away. Much more coming your way. Stay right there. Hi, I'm Max Keiser. Welcome back to the Keiser Report, coming to you from sunny Los Angeles, California. Time now to go to Nomi Prins, author of It Takes a Pillage, and her new book, Black Tuesday. Nomi, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Thanks so much. Glad you're here.
Nomi, let's talk about the scoundrel, Jamie Dimon. He oversees an accounting fraud called J.P. Morgan Chase. He says he's got an egregious loss at their London desk that has cost them billions. So walk us through what's going on here.
Yeah, there's an alleged desk, well, an actual desk with the alleged role of hedging the bank's positions. But they didn't really hedge the bank's positions. They took positions. They bet on the corporate market in a synthetic derivative fashion that it would improve. That is a bet. That bet has so far, because the corporate market hasn't improved, lost J.P. Morgan Chase $2 billion that we know of, and counting.
Wait a minute. My memory seems to tell me that just a couple of weeks ago, Blythe Masters, who runs that desk, was saying everything's hedged. But that's clearly false, isn't it?
Yeah, a hedge would be, I loan you as a bank and you're a corporation money. I hedge against the possibility that you will not pay me back. In that respect, I would be doing the exact opposite of what J.P. Morgan Chase did out of their London office, which is basically doubled down.
The martingale betting system. When you go to the roulette wheel, you have a losing bet on red, you double it on red again and you spin, and you keep doing it until you actually win. And this works, of course, if you have an infinite line of credit, and that's the only time it can really work. And that's what we're talking about here, isn't it? These banks have an infinite line of credit. They can never actually lose because the Fed will never cut them off.
Exactly. They have almost 0% money coming from the Fed. And not only that, they have the knowledge that the Fed, that central banks in Europe, that the Treasury Department will do whatever they can, whenever they can, to keep these biggest banks afloat, because they have just seen that unfolding in dramatic fashion in the last few years. So knowing that that's the case, having money available at almost 0% interest, they can really bet whatever they want to, because at the end of the day, they will be protected because they will have more cash to go to that roulette wheel again and keep it going.
So he's Jamie Dimon. He's at the Global Derivatives Casino, and he wants to bet on red, comes up black, but he says, you know what, that bet never happened. We're just going to put that off the balance sheet. And now their off balance sheet is like 90 trillion, or Or is it their balance sheet? Or is it the Fed's balance sheet? Where do the two meet? Are they overlapping? Isn't there some amazing, amorphous new element that's been invented there where there's not here nor there? What's going on?
Well, first of all, I got to say, Jamie Dimon doesn't think it's a bet, or doesn't say it's a bet. So that's the first line of defense that he has in this egregious mistake that has been made by this desk in London that is supposed to be hedging the bank's positions, but in fact was doubling down on them. So that's number one. Number two, yes, all of these positions, this derivatives market that has grown so massively, not just in the last decade, but even since the 2008 crisis, the positions of JP Morgan Chase with respect to derivatives have increased by 20%. So with all the catastrophe that happened, they've actually gone further into this murky, synthetic, risky element. And because they're all interrelated, it doesn't matter if it's on JP Morgan's books, off its books, on Bank of America's books, off its books. There's a backing of a Fed, and there's an element of inability to really know what those positions are as they are unfolding. Now we know that there has been a position that has gone long these corporate credits in a synthetic derivatives way. We know that now. We know they say this position has lost $2 billion. We also know that $2 billion can easily become 3 or 4 or 5 or more if the rest of the financial community attacks the position. That was the devolution of MF Global. We've seen all this, and yet it keeps going.
So Jamie's a gambleaholic.
Who says he's not?
Us all gambleaholics.
Which must be the same. Exactly, right. He needs an AA and sort of...
He needs to go to Gamblers Anonymous.
International Gamblers Anonymous.
He needs an intervention.
There you go.
Now, you mentioned...
He needs his bank to be chopped up and separated.
But nobody is willing to get in front of this guy and do an intervention and say, we need to cut you off from the credit spigot, you gambleaholic sleazebag. They're not doing that.
They're not doing that. In fact, the SEC, Mary Schapiro, went about saying, yeah, we're looking into this after the fact, and not because beforehand she might have noticed that there's a $79 trillion exposure of derivatives that JP Morgan Chase has had on only $1 trillion of assets and $1 trillion of deposits. So the leverage in their institution, wherever it is they put it, is immense. That's what Mary Schapiro and the SEC should have been focused on, not, oh, gee, surprise, there's an egregious error. There could be some problems here now.
So Mary Schapiro is an enabler.
She's an enabler.
And in the case of the alcoholic, many times they'll hide bottles around the house in case they get caught so they can get drunk whenever they want to. So Jamie's placing these bad bets, these derivative losses, around the balance sheet of his bank and other banks. You know, comment briefly on what we learned about the Lehman Brothers Repo 105 scam, because I think it relates to this to some degree. If you recall, viewers, when it came time to report at the end of the quarter, they simply took billions of dollars of debt and they parked it at another bank for a couple of days. Yep. Then when the regulators left to go to some other bank, they put it back on their balance sheet. Now, aren't all banks doing this to one degree or another? And isn't that the primary purpose of the global derivative/shadow banking industry, to hide accountability and to hide liability?
Yeah, and to hide losses. It's called window dressing. It happens in different ways on different quarters throughout different banks. And the worse they are doing, the more they require the window dressing. So the worse the position is, the more risk it incurs for the bank, for other banks, for all of the population that deals with these institutions and has no recourse and no Fed to bail them out. The window dressing gets deeper and deeper and deeper the more that the loss increases. Okay,
so now the group of investors out there who know really what's going on to the hedge funds. The hedge funds have huge access to capital as well. Hedge funds are some of the best customers of banks like JP Morgan because they open up these credit lines to them, and that gives them the ability to make these huge bets. Now, what would it take to get a hedge fund to break ranks and say, you know what, I'm going to be the winner in this prisoner's dilemma. I'm going to be the winner of this game theory John Nashian moment, and I'm going to attack JP Morgan stock viciously with naked short sales, everything I've got, because I'm going to make a bundle. And isn't there a risk of one of these hedge funds going rogue and effectively falling out of favor with the club, as it were? I mean, isn't that a genuine threat?
It's a genuine threat. Look at what Paulson did with the hedge fund Paulson when he basically bet against long positions in the subprime market. He shorted the heck out of them. And there's no reason why another hedge fund can't do the same thing with the corporate credit positions, the synthetic positions that JP Morgan has on. It's like it's needled in, they can see. The thing that would prevent that would be if they have an attachment to JP Morgan through getting credit from JP Morgan, which, you know, as you mentioned, these banks provide because they have all this cheap money. They provide it to all their customers, and the whole thing morphs into this huge snowball of derivatives that keeps going down and down and down.
But it does break down. It broke down at Lehman Brothers. It broke down at Bear Stearns,
yes.
where essentially the hedge funds, the bank, J.P. Morgan, I think, was one of the biggest beneficiaries of attacking Bear Stearns
yes.
with short sales.
Yes.
They acquire those assets for pennies on the dollar, and we see this kind of using financial instruments as weapons.
Yeah.
Now they're being, so my question is, J.P. Morgan have used them, weapons to acquire assets on the cheap, and they've used, Goldman has used them in Greece to acquire Greek assets on the cheap. I'm just saying, isn't there somebody out there with the cojones to take on J.P. Morgan? Why can't they attack Morgan and take that stock down to zero?
You know, it could be a desk at Citibank. You know, there could be an institution or a group that says, you know what, we're going to make a quick buck against not just J.P. Morgan stock, which has been down 10% after the announcement of this $2 billion and counting loss, and whatever else lurks behind that, but against the very position, which will make the unwinding of that position just create a bigger loss for J.P. Morgan, and the whole thing goes down and down, confidence erodes, etc. It could be a bank, it could be a hedge fund, and it could happen. It's very plausible.
Well, we can hope, can't we? There's so much fraud in all of this, and you know, Jamie Dimon, he made no mention of these problems in his quarterly shareholder conference. Obviously, he omitted some key information, which is a crime through omission. The options market was quite active on that news. Obviously, some insider trading going on as well. They've been buying back their own stock. So talk a little bit about that phase of this multifaceted fraud.
Yeah, well, in April, there was a announcement, or people knew about the fact that there was this position that was growing, and there was a Wall Street Journal article on it. You know, people talked about it, you talked about it, and that kind of festered, and Jamie Dimon was like, well, it's under control. You know, this is a guy that the business press considers to be this champion golden wonder boy of Wall Street. He's had it under control. He'll have it under control. And that's what he goes in with. Even now that this $2 billion has come out as a loss, his whole MO is, yeah, it's a mistake, it's egregious, but, you know, I got it. You know, we're going to cut it and move on. And it doesn't work that way in an integrated, unregulated, derivatives-heavy financial market.
Well, let's talk about the global banking community for a second, because some of the banks in other countries are not happy with what's going on. In Canada, for example, as it relates to this global move by the Bank of International Settlements to raise, you know, quality capital, Tier 1 capital, Jamie Dimon was actually hectoring the head of the Bank of Canada about why he shouldn't be so forceful in attempting to raise capital requirements for banks. Like, here's a sovereign. It's Canada. It's not Jamie's client. You know, maybe it's a client, but I mean, it's not Jamie's country. Jamie's not Canadian. Where does he get off going into Canada and lecturing their government on, you know, how to commit fraud like he does?
Well, Jamie Dimon has been enabled by an entire infrastructure of politicians, of a Fed, of a Treasury Department, of an SEC, to grow this like humongous egotistical head about how banks should operate because he's so great at it, ignoring all of the help he got, ignoring the fact that, you know, you mentioned Bear Stearns before. In that takeover that J.P. Morgan did of Bear Stearns, they're still guaranteed to $29 billion worth of money in case those positions fail by the Federal Reserve. We're still on the hook for their takeover of Bear Stearns. So he's been enabled to do all this. And when you enable, like, you know, a truculent bully in the neighborhood to keep doing what he's doing, and you say, don't worry about it, here's some more capital, you know, here's someone else's lunch, you just keep doing it. And he's just showing that he continues to have that arrogance and the large institution behind him to keep doing it.
So, to use the bully analogy, he's stealing milk money from the kids at school, and he's doing so with the permission of the principal, who not only gives him permission, but guarantees that if he doesn't get the full extent of the milk money he's trying to steal, that they're going to reimburse him for that amount for a certain period of time.
Yeah, basically that's what's going on. And it's against a history where even that bank has never been as egregious as what he is doing, has never had as much capital to float on, as many favors. And Jamie Dimon was voted in twice to be a Class A New York Federal Reserve director. He's in there a second time. You know, he's at the top of this game he's involved in, and that has created what is potentially what is a bad situation, J.P. Morgan, because it is connected so much to the rest of the banking community, the best of the financial markets, and to us who have to deal with these institutions when we deposit money, take out checks, use credit cards, or whatever else.
Let's talk about London for a second, because London is really the nexus of the global fraud, isn't it? They had the AIG went through there, MF Global went through, Lehman Brothers, Madoff, they all went through London. You were in London. You were at Bear Stearns for a time, so you know what's going on there quite well. What is it about London, that the regulatory framework, what's actually going on there where it becomes the clearinghouse effectively for global financial fraud?
London's had a history of being that clearinghouse since before the First World War. When U.S. banks have wanted to circumvent any regulation that has happened, from before that to Glass-Steagall in 1933 and so forth, they find a place in London, they open it, that's where they lend from, that's what they've done, and other institutions have done that as well. And what's happened is London has never kept up with or had the wherewithal or the desire or whatever to keep up with the sheer volume of transactions that go through. And banks always take advantage of the weakest place to do the most business.
Nomi Prins, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Nomi Prins. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.